look at the timeline if we can, because actually we have to go back, believe it or not, to last November 2022, as we look at the Farage and Coutts timeline. So it was in November that Coutts' Wealth Reputational Risk Committee there met in a room and talked about Farage, and it was explosive, what they came up with. So they said he's a disingenuous grifter. His views are increasingly out of touch with wider society. And then they say being associated with NF, Nigel Farage, presents a material and ongoing reputational risk to the bank. So that's all sitting there inside the bank. And it's a little while before the balloon goes up, right? Because at the moment, the bank is just thinking, what do we do about this? And they shut his account. And Farage, we've just got this letter released this morning, then writes to the bank. And he says, I banked with Coutts for some years. I had a guy called Mark Pierce. I then get a new man called Min Fung, who I've never spoken to. And now I've got a phone call to say the accounts will be closed, followed by a letter. No explanation is offered. So Farage is cross. And then he says, if other big banks decide I'm too high profile, we'll be in an interesting position. What on earth is going on? So the bank, surely alarm bells are ringing at the bank here. He says, then you've got someone to call me rather than email. And if you don't sort this out, I'm going to bring a security van to the bank to collect my cash. So the bank now know they're in bother with Farage. At the moment, at this point, Coutts itself has not been named. But then the row deepens. Farage goes public. He says, I'm not going to say the bank, but my accounts have been closed and I'm being refused an account elsewhere. You then get the famous dinner where the BBC business editor Simon Jack, who was right in front of me at this dinner, was sitting next to the Natwest chief executive, Dame Alison Rose. Okay? And then the key thing that happens the next day, Simon reports that Farage's accounts were closed because he didn't have the money he needed. He fell below the wealth limit. And he then says, wait a minute, that's not true. I've got the 36-page Stasi-style surveillance report from the November meeting. So he put in what's called a subject access request, and he got the minutes of the Wealth Reputational Risk Committee meeting. And of course, then the microscope goes into all of these phrases in the bank. They actually get published. And that gets really, really nasty for the bank because Farage starts to win. Because these comments about him are simply not defensible in the public environment. And the end result of all that, because it emerged that Dame Alison Rose had wrongly briefed Simon Jack, is that it's Coutts 0, Farage 1. He's winning. And the question is, how much further should this go? Because at the moment, it's a rout. This is like where you're thinking it's going to be 10-0. Peter in Essex, should the whole board go, do you think?
Hello, Jeremy. Well, yes, I think they should. I think this is absolutely disgusting. It's not anything to do basically about Farage, because obviously a lot of people love him or hate him. It's about every British citizen has the right to a bank account unless I think it's fraud or money laundering. But I think for the banks to just cancel people's accounts because they don't like their views, apparently it happened to that vicar with the Yorkshire...
Was it Fothergill? Yeah, in Yorkshire, yeah, whose bank account was closed because he went into the Yorkshire Building Society and said, I don't like your pride posters.
Right. I mean, I heard initially it was because they had a survey and asked him to comment about the bank, and he commented, and they thought, well, we don't like that. I mean, at the moment, obviously a lot of people are happy with it because they don't like one set of views, but this could change. If people's political views change, it could be us, it could be you, it could be anybody.
For sure.
These days, I couldn't get that. Basically, you're dead, aren't you?
Well, yeah, you're right. I mean, it may be worse than cutting off your water. And I wonder whether, we've got a politician here. I mean, Peter, there's got to be either you force all banks to take all customers, which is difficult, or you say you have one bank that must take everyone. What about that? Because you can't live without a bank.
No, Peter's absolutely right. And what the thing is, it's widespread, and it's happened, and we know it's happened to people who supported Brexit, for instance. And the great service Nigel Farage has done has to take on the bank and has succeeded. How many of us could have gone that? How many of us would have been able to defeat the bank that was not telling the truth? So, I mean, I introduced a private members bill to make it compulsory for banks to provide people who were homeless with bank accounts, because how can you survive in this world without bank accounts? And if you're being excluded, not on commercial grounds, but on the grounds of because of your politics or where you live, that's wrong.
Let's go to Kevin in Lincolnshire. Hi, Kevin.
Oh,
Where does this stop? Do you close Coutts? Do you say, look, this bank's got no right to exist anymore?
what for Farage?
Yeah.
No. The thing is, Nigel Farage is not a very nice person, is he?
Well, you say that. A lot of people would disagree.
Well, that's fair enough. That's their view.
Well, yeah,
But my view is it's not very nice.
Okay.
And let's face it, there's plenty more banks, isn't there?
Well, he said I think he said he couldn't open accounts elsewhere. So
Why?
I don't know whether banks want him because he's controversial.
The thing is, Jeremy, if you have a shop and someone comes into your shop and you don't like them, are you in your right to tell them that you don't want them in your shop?
Well, this is the key thing, Jenny, isn't it? Is whether banks have got the right to say no. You're like a pub. You're barred. How about that?
Well, I mean, I think Coutts is a very specific thing. It is by definition exclusive. You have to have a lot of money in the first place to bank there. But it's owned by Natwest, and Natwest is 39% owned by the taxpayer, and that's where it becomes complicated. But yeah, Coutts is already exclusive. It's already saying no. It would say no to me.
Coutts is effectively a really posh restaurant that's owned by McDonald's, isn't it? That's what Coutts is. I think I'd be if I had the money, I'd open
I
an
would
account.
not slander McDonald's by putting them in the same name
Well,
as NatWest.
but you guys want Coutts to continue. I just think you just take its banking license away, don't you? It's broken every rule in the book here.
It's not just about Coutts. That's the point. Nigel has exposed a problem that's systematic. And the government needs to look into this and take some action. And it may be, just have the simple, that you cannot exclude somebody on their political views.
Well, for sure, but can you exclude... let's say someone comes out of jail, they've done 15 years for murder, and you say, well, we don't have murderers in this bank. Is that fair?
No, it's not.
What do you... the person might want to go straight and have a bank account and have a job, David in Cumbria, hi.
Hi, Jeremy. I'm going to take a slightly different view on the whole thing. I've been to a couple of sporting events recently, and you cannot use cash to buy an ice cream.
Correct.
You have to use... And
we're on the contactless world now, yeah.
Yeah, I find that, I'm one of these people that believe in freedom of choice. And if, to pay £2.50 on a debit or credit card to me seems pretty pointless.
I know, but then maybe that's the world now, David. We've got to get with it. I mean, I went into
I'm fully with the world.
Well, I know.
It's not just a UK problem. It's a global problem.
I went into a shop and I bought a bread roll and I gave the guy a £5 and he looked at this note and he said, I can't take that. He looked at it as if I was mad. And he said, you've got to and it was like 80p. Thanks, David. Angela in Cardiff, hi.
Good morning.
So, are you with Nigel Farage, or do you think, no, it's 1-0, he doesn't need to make it 10-0?
Absolutely not. I'm a retired nurse, so I understand confidentiality, Jeremy. I really do. So there are two separate issues here. A breach of confidentiality and then the issue of choosing him as a customer. I am really struggling to find one shred of sympathy for this man who deceived the country 7 years ago. Oh, I think you've taken a turn.
I thought you were going the other way. What,
no,
you don't think he needs to? They need to respect his confidentiality because he was wrong on Brexit.
No. For me, I just detest everything really about what he stands for. And he lied to the country. He's caused irreparable damage to this country. He's deceived the country. I'm not sitting on the fence here.
I can tell.
Being absolutely
you don't need to
honest.
say that.
I just find it really hard when somebody has sat on the television and lied openly and deceitfully to this country, and he's now calling it double standards. He's now calling out somebody else for deceit, and I just find it really hard. And I think I doubt that you'll find anybody who will sympathise with him.
Well, I don't know, Jenny. What about that? Because he was wrong. Andrew says he was wrong on Brexit. In fact, lied on Brexit. He shouldn't expect higher standards from others.
I think that's what makes him such a great test case, because I also think he's done unbelievable harm to this country. I think he's an incredibly damaging figure, and because of that, that's why quite often it helps if it's the person you sympathise with least. You have to look at their circumstances. I think he's awful, and yet I do think he has a point here. Everybody has the same right to confidentiality, and everybody has the same right to have a bank account.
You're sitting next to a First Division Brexiteer.
I know I am.
And I would share stage with Nigel, close as I am to you today. Look, I absolutely reject all those comments about Nigel in relation to Brexit, and also this idea that
Brexit's going well?
Pardon?
You think Brexit's going well?
I do. Should we go back on that, because we do this every time I come?
Well, we
When
do.
you look
No,
amazement. No, we won't do it this
No, let's not do it again.
But,
I just
you
want
know,
to
it's
check.
absolutely
At some
clear,
point, I'll ask you, and you say no, it's not actually.
No, it won't ever, because it's a lot.
What would it take?
Well, first of all, we're not paying the £22.5 billion. Half the defence budget is. That's what you have to give the EU to be in there. We've ended the free movement of people. We make our own laws in our own country, judged by our own judges. We have a free trade agreement with the EU. We're making free trade agreements. Tell me where Brexit has gone wrong. And Nigel said we would do these things, and we've done it. And the fact that there are sore losers, fine. But because there are sore losers doesn't mean a bank can close your account.
Right, we'll take more calls, because we're getting loads of calls on the Nigel Farage banking row. He's 1-0 up against Coutts. Should the referee blow the whistle, or do you want to see him score another 9?